All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the ideas of a guy who didn't just write the book on economics, he pretty much invented the game. We're talking about Adam Smith.
And this is the question, the big one, that drove everything he did. For centuries, people had been scratching their heads over this, but Smith, he was convinced he'd cracked the code. Okay, so to really get it, we've got to start with the man himself. Who exactly was Adam Smith, and what was going on in his world that led to these, world-changing ideas?
So, he was born way back in 1723 in Scotland, right at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. And you gotta understand, he wasn't just some guy watching from the sidelines. He was right in the thick of it, trying to make sense of all this incredible change. And then, bam, in 1776, he drops The Wealth of Nations, and it becomes like the operating manual for modern economics.
And this right here is a total game changer. See, before Smith, everyone thought a country's wealth was just how much gold it had piled up. Smith comes along and says, nope, you're looking at it all wrong. He argued that real wealth isn't some pile of shiny metal, it's what people can make. It's a dynamic, living, breathing, vast workshop.
Okay, so if wealth is all about production, the next logical question is, how do you get more of it? How do you boost that production? Well, Smith's big aha moment came from a place you probably wouldn't expect, a simple pin factory.
And what he saw there sounds almost ridiculously simple to us today, but back then, it was revolutionary. He noticed that if you take one big, complicated job and break it down into a bunch of tiny, specialized tasks, what he called the division of labor, the amount of stuff you can produce just explodes.
And get this, the numbers are just nuts. Smith calculated that one person trying to do all 18 steps by themselves would be lucky to make one pin in a whole day. But a small crew of just 10 people, with each one focusing on just a couple of steps, they could churn out an incredible 48,000 pins. That, right there, is the power of specialization in a nutshell.
But Smith wasn't just some cheerleader for this system. He was a realist. He saw the downside too. On one hand, yeah, the division of labor makes a nation richer, workers get better at their one little thing, you save a ton of time. But on the other hand, he worried about the human cost. He knew it could make work mind-numbingly boring and could, crush a person's spirit and creativity.
Okay, so specialization is the key to making more stuff. Check. But that opens up a whole new can of worms. How do we decide what all that stuff is actually worth? Why is one thing crazy expensive and another thing dirt cheap?
This is the classic puzzle he had to solve. Think about it. Water. You literally can't live without it. Its use value is off the charts, but it costs next to nothing. Then you have diamonds. They're pretty, mostly for show, right? Very little use value. And yet their exchange value, their price, is through the roof. It just doesn't seem to make sense. So what gives?
Smith's answer brings it all back to his big idea of the vast workshop. He said, look, the real value of something isn't just how useful it is. The true measure is how much work, how much human sweat and effort went into getting it. Getting water is easy. It takes almost no labor. Finding, mining, and cutting a diamond, that takes a ton of labor. And that's the difference.
All right, so labor creates value. We've got that. But now for the next piece of the puzzle. When you sell that product, where does all the money go? Who gets a slice of the pie? To figure this out, Smith basically dissected the price of, pretty much anything. And what he found is that the price you pay for something isn't just one thing. It's actually split three ways, going to the three main players in the economy. Part of it is wages, which goes to the workers for doing the work. Part of it is profit, which goes to the factory owners for taking the risk. And the last piece is rent, which goes to the people who own the land the factory is on. And he said wages aren't just some random number pulled out of a hat, nope. They're set in a marketplace, just like anything else. It all comes down to simple supply and demand. And here's a really important part. He believed that as a whole country gets richer, wages should naturally climb, so people aren't just scraping by to survive. Same deal for the other two pieces. Profit is basically the reward for the people who put their money on the line. And rent, that's what you paid just for using the land. But here's where Smith flipped the script on everyone. People used to think high rent made food expensive. Smith said, no, you have it backwards. High food prices are what allow landowners to charge high rent. They just charge whatever they can get away with.
So if the economy is this kind of self-running machine, with all these gears of wages and profits and prices all turning on their own, what's the government's job in all of this? Are they just supposed to stand back and not touch anything?
And the answer is For the most part, yeah. Smith was a huge champion of the free market. He had this famous idea of the invisible hand, that when everyone just looks out for themselves, this invisible force magically guides the whole economy to a good place for everybody. It works better, he said, than any government plan ever could. So his main point was, government, please, just take a light touch.
But, and this is a huge but, he wasn't saying there should be no government. Not at all. He knew you needed a government for things like defense and justice, and that meant you needed taxes. So he laid out these 4 brilliant, super simple rules for how to do it right. Basically, be fair, be clear, make it easy to pay, and don't waste money collecting it. I mean, these are the same exact things politicians are still arguing about today.
And that brings us right back to today, and to the big, lingering question. Adam Smith's ideas are the literal foundation of our modern world. But things have changed a little in 250 years, right? We've got AI, instant global trade, cryptocurrencies, stuff he couldn't have even dreamed of. So, are his old school rules still the answer? Or do we need a new playbook? That's the question he left for us to figure out.